Hey guys, welcome into Sports Around the Bar. As always, I'm Jake and I'm joined today by Drew, where we are talking about Week 7 and all the action that's going to be going down this week in the NFL. And Drew, man, I'm going to let you say hi in just a second, but I got to tell you, we were going through this list of games. This is not the best NFL week we've ever seen, man.
No, it's actually a terrible week for us. Like, hey, man, let's go through every single game this week. That'd be a great episode. Let's do that on the worst week you could possibly do it.
I got to say, if not for our teams, and you're welcome everybody else watching, if not for our teams playing at 1 o'clock, this slate would be Cincinnati and Baltimore. And other than that, I don't know, there's a whole lot more to watch that's that interesting. Now, we're going to watch it anyway. We love the game, but there's just something about Falcons and Miami that doesn't really excite me that much. I don't know, call me crazy, but not premier matchups. That's okay. We're going to go through all of those matchups as well as the premier ones first. So with that, let's get started. And Drew, why don't we talk about the Chiefs going on the road to face Tennessee? Tell me this. How did this game wind up as a 1 o'clock feature when both 2 weeks ago when Kansas City played the Bills, it was on primetime. The Titans played them on Monday night this past week. Who was making this NFL schedule that said, oh yeah, Kansas City versus Tennessee, Week 7, let's throw it on at 1 o'clock?
Someone that didn't know football, that's for sure. It's crazy to think that we're going to talk about this because we have literally been talking about it all week long. You and I on the phone, giving each other crap, hashing out what we thought about this game. You know, we both live locally here in Nashville, so it's we hear it everywhere. And then we get to go on our show and we get to talk about it. It's pretty exciting. You know, it's like you never get tired of it, but at the same time, it's like, oh, we got to talk about this again.
So let me start by talking about what I think is going to be the key to this game. And realistically, I'm taking the easy way out here. I could try to dive deep and talk about the Tennessee Titans cornerback injuries. It's Derrick Henry, right? Like everybody's talking about it. Like if they're going to win this game and they're going to outshoot Patrick Mahomes, it just comes down to ball control, sucking up all the time off the clock, and just not letting Mahomes and them get comfortable on the field. Is there anything other than Derrick Henry that's going to be the key to this game?
No, I mean, he's definitely the key. He's the key to the Titans' whole offense for the rest of the year. I hate to break it to you, but it's about quick touchdowns for the Titans. It's about getting that lead, making it where you're not kicking field goals. And I know you guys don't kick a lot of field goals. You got Derrick Henry.
We miss a lot of them.
Yeah, well, he scored 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games, so it's not like in each game. So it's not like you're going to have problems with that, but it's about putting up points very quickly, getting the Chiefs off their heels and kind of going, oh, man, now we're playing catch-up. They're keeping us off the field. This is not good. You got literally the best running back in the league versus, like, I think we're either the second worst or the third worst run defense. So it's not really that exciting on my perspective. And if you flip it, it's literally the exact same thing that the Chiefs are going to try to do for the Titans. It's about put up points as quickly as possible. I prefer 3 touchdowns, but I'll accept 2. 14-0 would be a great start for Kansas City. And it's about making the Titans go, okay, maybe we can't run that ball. Maybe we do got to throw it a little bit. I've seen other teams put up 14, 21 points on the Titans and they don't stop running the ball. So I don't really think that's a great way to do it, but it's what the Chiefs have to do to create a W coming out of Nashville.
Now, a lot of injuries in this game. Both of these teams have seen their fair share. You know, Tyreek Hill is questionable for this one. Chris Jones looks like he might return, but is still on the injury list, is questionable. How big are those stars for Kansas City? Because everyone knows it seems to be more like a top-heavy team where you rely on your stars to win week in and week out. If one or both of those guys don't play, is Kansas City going to win this game still?
Well, it looks like both of those are going to play. I know they're questionable. I know it's you know, what could happen. We never know, but as far as coming out of Kansas City, the word I hear is they're both going to play, especially Hill for sure is given 100% go. You need both of them. you really need Hill. Hill is a difference maker on this offense. He is the guy that makes it go. I know. You got Patrick Mahomes. What are you talking about? You got Travis Kelce. I think the 3 losses, Hill has 0 touchdowns, and the 3 wins, Hill has touchdowns. There you go. That's the best stat I could give you. Hill is the most important person on this offense right now. He needs to be on the field.
I agree, and I think if you're going to slow down Derrick Henry, I think Chris Jones is the start, especially moving him back towards the inside in this game. It's what I would do. Personally, I'd go after Nate Davis the way he's played this season. But I think if I had to pick one of the two to be without, it would definitely be Chris Jones. I want to have Tyreek Hill just beating up on that already kind of suspect Titans secondary that's going through a ton of injuries. Last week, they only had 3 guys healthy when they got out of the end of that game. The question is going to be, how do they try to stop that? I don't know. I think they're just hoping Mahomes and him aren't on the same page when the game starts, because if they are, it's either going to be 55-54 Titans or they're losing this game. So still remains to be seen, but it seems like every time the Titans go into one of these games and I say, man, I just don't know how they're going to do this. They have a game plan for that, and then something else just goes terribly, terribly wrong, and you never foresee it. They're like the hardest team for me to predict is just the Titans and what they're going to do week in and week out. Now, the line started at about 5.5, Drew. It's down to about 4.5 right now. Me personally, I'm going to take the Chiefs to win this game, but the Titans to cover that 4.5 line. I think we're going to have a closer game that ultimately winds up somewhere around a field goal's difference for me.
It drives me nuts when you pick my Chiefs to win because it seems like they always lose against your team. So
Good.
I'm gonna pick the Titans. To be honest, I think the Titans are gonna win this game, and they need to come out healthy. I think both teams need to come out healthy. This league and going into week 7 is so much injuries, so many. Stay healthy, keep healthy, and hopefully it's a good game.
I agree. Let's talk about our other only good game this week. And again, another 1 o'clock start for two teams that, at least when they were making the schedule out in the offseason, you could say nobody knew Cincinnati was going to be this good, even though we kind of had suspected they'd be better at throwing the ball a little bit. Everyone kind of knew Baltimore was going to be good, so I kind of forgive them for putting this game on at 1 o'clock. But at the very least, of the rest of the games this week, these two games seem like they're going to be the highlights, and they both seem to take place at the same time.
Yeah, how long has it been since you could sit there and say that the Bengals might be in the game of the week? It's been a while.
Probably going back to Andy Dalton. I know we talked about this before, but it's probably been since the Andy Dalton era where they went to the playoffs 4 straight years. I just don't remember them being the game of the week very often.
Yeah, it's been a long time for them. If you were playing the Ravens, if this game was going into like week 3, and the Ravens were kind of still trying to figure themselves out. I know they're a 5-1 team, but they seem like they're getting really hot right now. I would say I think the Bengals got a chance. The Bengals are looking good. They're healthy. I think it's a possibility that they might win this game. Going into week 7, you got the Ravens. They look incredibly hot right now. They run the ball like crazy. Jackson is playing out of his mind, in my opinion. And then you go look at the Bengals, and they are just like every other team. Banged up. Questionable. Joe Mixon doesn't look like he looks good, but he doesn't look great. I think he's averaging like just shy of 4 yards a carry. You definitely want to see him do a little bit better than that. I want to pick the Bengals so bad because I want them to win this game. I want Joe Burrow to have a good career, but it's Ravens, right? I mean, it's got to be Ravens.
Well, the line's sitting at 6.5. Are you picking Cincinnati to cover that 6.5 line?
I think it's still going to be a close game. I still think the Bengals are a good team.
Now, it could be a close game. You know, you see on paper these teams don't seem like they're that far off, but when you look at the Bengals and the Ravens, like going in from last year, I think the Ravens wound up beating them like 37-3 one game, and I think the other one was like 27-7. Now, I know one of those games was without Joe Burrow, but it just seems like the Ravens have had Cincinnati's number here recently, even with Joe Burrow there. 6.5 points is a lot, especially in the NFL. Usually you don't see those big one-touchdown lines, but I think I'm going to take the Ravens in this one, and I'm just going to bet on them blitzing Joe Burrow to the point that offensive line's going to crumble. They've still been a problem. You know, everybody said in Cincinnati there was the big debate between do we take Penei Sewell or do we take Jamar Chase? Jamar Chase looks like he's worked out fantastically, but the offensive line is still a weakness, and I think the Ravens are going to be able to exploit that enough this week. That 6.5, I would say like the line should be somewhere around 8. I feel like that's where this one's going to be. I think the Ravens are probably going to score 31, and the Bengals are going to get close to 23. Better game than it's been in years past, but I still think with this offensive line, the Ravens are going to feast on him on defense, and that's going to be the difference in this one.
I'm going to stick with them being close, man. I'm thinking like a field goal.
Okay.
It wouldn't even surprise me if it was a missed extra point that wins this game.
On to our more questionable games here, Drew. Next, we're going to talk about the former Redskins, the now Washington to-be-named Laters, playing against the Green Bay Packers. First off, who would have bet that they would have gone this long without picking a name? Second off, who would have thought they'd have been as bad as they've been this season, man? I look at this team, and I don't think there's been a bigger disappointment for me in the NFL than this Washington defense that should have been what carried this squad. Just kind of adding to the problem that you already had when you lost your starting quarterback in Ryan Fitzpatrick.
I just want you to know you're going to get us canceled using them as calling them the Redskins.
I said the former Redskins. That will never not be true.
You be careful. You know, you're gonna cross that line, you're gonna get us canceled.
Can't even talk about what they used to be named. Anyway, Drew,
they're gonna
regardless
that's our
of what
TV
they
deal just gone right there, man. TV deal gone.
Yep. Dang, I had that thing ready to sign on my desk right now, so we'll have to just wait for him to come back. But let me say this: regardless of what they're called, the defense is underachieved. Is there anything that shows just some reason why they're going to be able to hang with the 5-1 Packers that outside of Week 1 have been really good this year?
I mean, you want to get behind the hype of Heineke. You want to be like, oh man, he's really airing the ball out. You know, you want to get behind Gibson. Man, Gibson's running real hard, a lot of power behind it. McKissick looks great. You know, one of the best receiving running backs in the league. You know, you look at McLaurin and you're like, great receiver. He would be, you know, a star if he was anywhere besides Washington. You want to get excited about this offense, and you want to say, yeah, they could put up the points to keep up with the Packers. I know you're bringing up the defense, but do you really stop Aaron Rodgers? I mean, the Chicago Bears couldn't stop Aaron Rodgers. Do you really stop Aaron Rodgers?
Well, you got to slow him down a little bit, right?
No, your offense has to outscore the Packers. That's how you win games against them. You got to outscore him. I mean, the guy has thrown 3 interceptions, you know, in almost half. Well, it's not half the season up yet, but still. He's not turning the ball over. This is a tough team to go up against. You just got to make sure you can put up points to keep up with them. No, I don't believe Washington's going to do it, though. Even that all being said, there's no way Washington's going to keep up with it. You're right. It has to be the defense, but it's not going to be.
I will say this. At the very least, last year, they gave Green Bay, you know, a hell of a game where there was hard-fought victory from Green Bay, I think at the last second, if I'm remembering right. I know it was a close game. They battled with them last year. I think we might see a similar kind of game this year where Green Bay has kind of stumbled a little bit. If not for Cincinnati missing a bunch of field goals, they probably lose last week, and maybe we feel a little bit more different about them. 2 weeks ago. And then you had the Bears last week that it was a sticky game where the Bears were always just kind of like in it, but not really. I feel like that's going to be kind of where Washington is in this one. I think ultimately they lose, but that 8-point line where Green Bay is favored by 8 points here, Drew, you know, I just don't see it. I know it's in Lambeau. I know there's usually like 3 points or thereabout when it comes to who's home and who's away, but this 8 points just seems like a lot, especially in the NFL, and the Green Bay Packers not really just destroying teams, kind of like we've expected that offense to. I think Washington is going to be in this game for longer. I don't think Heineke's going to look good, but they'll run well enough. I think that defensive line, which despite how bad the defense has struggled, is now, I think, up to second in pressure and pass rushing this year. So the defensive line has been good and kind of gotten back to where we expected them to after a slow start. I think that's going to be the difference here. I think their D-line is going to frustrate Rodgers early. They're going to be in his face, especially with some of these injuries in the offensive line with guys like Josh Myers and Dennis Kelly missing time. They're missing offensive linemen in Green Bay. I think they're going to struggle a little bit against this pass rush, and maybe it just slows the game down a little bit. Maybe you have a couple of those frustrating turnovers where Green Bay doesn't seem like they're on the right page because Rodgers' timing is thrown off a little bit. So I'll take Washington to cover that 8-point line. I still will pick Green Bay to win, but I think this is more of a 4 or a 5-point victory instead of the 8 that we see the line at right now.
Just remember, Patrick Mahomes threw 500 yards on these guys last week. I think Aaron Rodgers can repeat that. I wouldn't be surprised that this is a victory by 14 points.
Okay, we'll move on. We'll talk about our next game, which is the Eagles going on the road to face the Raiders. Drew, this is an interesting matchup. It may be not on paper two teams bound for the playoffs, but I still think when we're talking about Philadelphia going up against the Raiders, these are two teams that stylistically seem pretty opposed to each other when you talk about how good that Philly defense has been and how stingy they've been at times versus an Oakland offensive line that has struggled a lot and Derek Carr's kind of succeeded without them. What do you think is going to happen in this game coming up?
Well, I'd just be careful saying that the Raiders aren't going to be playoff bound. You might have some Raiders fans coming after you.
Did I say both teams? I meant just the Eagles.
Okay. Might have.
Maybe I got Eagles fans coming after me. Maybe they're saying 2-4 isn't dead in the water just yet. So,
yeah, I thought you said both teams are not going to be looking at the playoffs. But that's all right. No big deal. Oh, man. When you thought John Gruden gone, you kind of expected this team to kind of like maybe flop on its face possibly because he's 10-year contract into year 4. This is supposed to be your head coach for the next 6 years. This is your leader of your team. You got him, and he's gone after some questionable emails. And
certainly not something you should send to the work computer.
Right. You thought you would see kind of a flop, and you saw the complete opposite. And I'm blanking out of the coach, the interim coach, he was the special teams coach. This guy looks like he's got this team rallied and ready to go. I mean, maybe he's really pushing for the head coaching spot next year.
I feel like you get a little bit of a dead cat bounce whenever you have those coach firings in the middle of the season where the first game, everybody's kind of energized and coming out with a little bit more like, hey, we got to prove it to the world. Big changes, everything's shaking up. It adds an element of energy to the building that a lot of successful teams usually don't need. But some of the teams that are either in the middle or, have struggled when you fire that head coach, it just gives those guys a boost because they know they're playing and trying to prove themselves to somebody else. But usually you kind of see that fizzle out in the next coming weeks. I think we'll probably see the same thing here in Oakland. And I'm actually going to say, even though Oakland is favored by 3 points here at home, I think the Eagles are just going to win this game outright. I think 3 points or not, Eagles are, in my opinion, playing very good football at times, even though they're not winning games. I mean, they just almost beat I don't want to say almost beat, but they hung with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They wound up losing that game by 6 points. And ultimately, I think that roster compared to what the Raiders have is just far and away better. I think that defensive front's going to frustrate Derek Carr a little bit. They're going to get in his face. And it's going to just be like it has been all season on Derek Carr to throw it down the field and just destroy these defenses. Now, I don't know that the Philadelphia has great linebackers. I don't really feel like the linebacker play has been very good behind the line this year. So I think it's going to be a struggle to cover guys like Darren Waller. But I do think on top of everything that we've seen out of Oakland, it's just going to be hard for them to match up. They're going to have a hard time running against that defensive front. They're going to have a hard time throwing down the field consistently when you don't have time to throw the ball. And realistically, I look at this squad and I say, they are 4-2, but it's one of those 4-2s that I just don't know that I believe it. I still think they're a little bit of fool's gold here, Drew, and I think Philly might expose that a little bit. I still think it's going to be close, but I think Philly's going to win this one by a point or two.
I'm going with the Raiders, man. I think they're going to ride this hype train. I think they got a good win last week, and I think they're going to take it in and go home. Or I can't remember if they're home or gone now. But anyways, they're going to bring Philly in at home, and they're going to beat them. Philly's tough team to play against, but I'm going to believe in this hype train. I think maybe Gruden was somewhat of a cancer. I mean, people talk about all the negative things after he's, someone's gone, and it seems like he was pretty rough and expected a lot out of players, and it's kind of like sometimes that doesn't work for professionals. So I'm gonna believe in Derek Carr. I'm gonna believe in Darren Waller, and I'm gonna see what this offense can do and see if Hurts can keep up.
Do they cover the 3 points? You think Oakland wins this by more than 3?
I do think Oakland wins this more than by 3.
Okay. If nothing else, I think regardless of what the records look like, I think these two teams pose some kind of interesting matchups where it's like a lot of strength on strength, a lot of weakness on strength. So I think there's going to be, if nothing else, something to watch here at 4 o'clock. Maybe it's not the best football you'll see all year. Maybe it's not Rams versus Bucs, but I still think this is going to be a good game. I think this is going to be one of the better ones of the week. And even though we're kind of split on which way we think it ultimately falls, I think we both kind of agree it's going to be close enough that it stays entertaining for a while.
Yeah, I think so too.
Moving on, let's talk about the Bucs as they take home field in Tampa Bay against the Chicago Bears. Another matchup from last year that didn't go the way we expected when Nick Foles trotted out there and handed Tom Brady another loss. Is there enough magic in Chicago to get that done again?
Well, we always talk about Belichick versus rookies and how well that usually doesn't go for the rookie. The quarterback that was doing the majority of that was Tom Brady. Tom Brady is 5-20 against rookie quarterbacks. I believe in Tom Brady. You got to, right? It's as much as Justin Fields is more than likely the future in Chicago, and I know a lot of Chicago fans are excited about him. I haven't seen a whole lot out of him that makes me go, okay, yeah, you got your guy for the next 10 years. I'm not saying he's terrible. I just don't know if I believe it just yet.
Well, Vegas obviously believes in Tom Brady, too, setting this line at 11.5, Drew. Where do you see that falling? Because 11.5 points in the NFL, it's not like Chicago's rolled over. I mean, they
right.
just battled with Green Bay. I know they lost by 10, but realistically, that game was, again, it was far enough away. I can't call it close, but it wasn't like they were blown out. I never felt like Green Bay was just in control entirely. I know it was poorly reffed. I know all the Green Bay fans are going to come at me and say, Rodgers had it all the time. It didn't feel like that to me when I was watching it. It felt like Green Bay was doing what they needed to stay out in front of a team in Chicago that at the very least was hanging with them. Are we going to get more of that? Because I think realistically that's what we're looking at here. I think even though Tampa has had a ton of success, they're 5-1 right now, they just haven't quite been as sharp as I've expected. them to be, whether you want to call it Super Bowl hangover or anything. They've got some injuries now, especially in the secondary. 11.5 is just a bridge too far for me. I think the Chicago defense is going to do just enough that maybe it's like last week where Tampa's in control the entire time. They're in the driver's seat, and then Chicago comes back to score that garbage time touchdown to ruin that 11.5 point line. I'll take Chicago to cover this. I really think Chicago, if you take out that Browns game, if you take out where Justin Fields and everybody else in the team just looked absolutely atrocious, they haven't been awful with him. Like, it hasn't been great. They've still going through some of those like growing pains with a rookie like last week where, at least in my opinion, he had an offsides that just wound up not being called, and he wound up throwing an interception on that. That stuff doesn't always happen week in and week out. If you take a little bit of that misfortune out of there, I think Chicago plays a tighter game this week. Still not good enough to beat the champs, but Drew, I think it's going to be a better game than that 12 points that Vegas had threw up there.
You say they're not as sharp. What did you expect them? I mean, they got the number 1 passing offense, 4th total offense. They got the 10th ranked defense. I mean, that's
okay, but the Rams won comfortably when they beat them. I mean, when you talk about their pass rush hasn't been great. And also, if you look at their schedule, if they missed that field goal against Dallas, are we talking about them differently? Like, hey, this team can't beat the good teams? Because, okay, they beat the Falcons, Drew. Congratulations. They beat the Patriots. They beat the Dolphins. They beat the Eagles. None of those teams are going to the playoffs. They barely escaped the Cowboys week 1, which it's week 1. So if I'm going to throw out any week, it's the one that happens right away, right? Where teams aren't used to each other and they're still gelling. But theoretically, they brought everybody back from last year. Like, you should be comfortable with the system and everybody in that case. And then they lost pretty convincingly to the Rams. So, yeah, it hasn't been as sharp. I know the record's there. I know we can look at the stats. Like, they're number 1 in passing. They've been great throwing the ball. But this was the complete team, remember? Isn't that what they sold us? Like, hey, they can do everything. Well, now all of a sudden the pass rush isn't looking as good. Now all of a sudden the secondary isn't looking as good either because of all these injuries. And running the ball seems like it's hit or miss with Fournette. And Ronald Jones is an afterthought. So, yeah, I think they're still a great team, but there's some chinks in the armor a little bit, right? It's not what we were sold when they said, "Oh man, Super Bowl champion, bringing everybody back." They might as well just give them the championship now, right?
Yeah, I just had to give you a hard time when you're right. But they're 5-1, right? I mean, I get that maybe. What?
Doesn't matter how it looks. Winning's winning. I agree with you there.
Right. I mean, regardless of what the schedule is, I mean, 5-1, and they lost to easily a playoff-bound team. It's like calling the Chiefs not a great team because they're 3-3. But when you look at the combined record of the teams that they lost to is like 15-4. It's ridiculous. Like yeah. Injuries are an issue. There's no doubt about that. You got Gronk's out. David, the linebacker's out. Richard Sherman, if that matters, he's out. They're still going to win this game, right?
Yeah, they're going to win. I don't think anybody's like, hold on, this is the Justin Fields game where we all kind of like our jaws drop and we say he's arrived. Even though I had him as my second quarterback in the draft last year, I do want to say one of these days that game is going to happen. It's just not going to be this week. I think this is more along the lines of Tampa's going to find a way to get their pass rush kind of fired back up, especially against the Chicago line that's been suspect at best this year. And we're going to be talking about Justin Fields running for his life and trying to do everything he can and just buy time. I mean, Green Bay, to their credit, did a good job getting after him, but they still found time to take shots down the field. Maybe that's a similar case this week where he hits one or two of those deep bombs, and instead of throwing a pick and what ultimately was waved off and could have been a second one, maybe instead this week they complete that, and Tampa's got to actually battle back a little bit here. I don't see it happening, but you never know. Maybe this is the Justin Fields game that we've all been waiting for.
Well, I'll tell you when it's going to happen. It's going to happen when I drop Allen Robinson off my fantasy team, because that's exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to, draft it high for him. That guy's going to do great. I'm going to drop him from my team, and then that week after that, he's going to have like 3 touchdowns. You'll see.
You're the one-man curse of the Chicago Bears.
I'll let you know when I drop him.
You're the one-man curse of the Chicago Bears, huh?
It just seems to happen that way every time with fantasy for me.
So what's your betting pick, man? I know you said the Tampa's going to win. Do you think they can do they win by 12?
I don't think so. Chicago still has a great defense. What?
This is the NFL, right? 12-point line?
Yeah, and you're talking about the 8th ranked defense in Chicago?
I know. That's what I'm saying. It's not going to be 12. It'll be like 6 or 7, maybe 8. 12?
Right.
I don't know. 12 is way too far for me. What do you think? Too much?
It is too much. And then you look at the over-under, they're sitting at 47. So they're just thinking.
The Bears aren't doing anything.
Exactly. They're not doing nothing.
Yeah, that is the line I would stay away from is the over-under, because I could realistically see both of those things happening, where maybe Chicago doesn't do a whole lot, but the defense keeps Tampa in check. Maybe they hit the under on that, but I don't know. It's Tom Brady. It's the number one passing offense, just like we talked about, and Fields has had enough of that, like, tantalizing play that you're like, there it is. That's why they took him in the first round. I can see it. He's made a few of those throws already that you're like, I see the flash. Maybe this is the week where he gets 3 or 4 of those flash throws, and that's the difference against a beat-up secondary in Tampa Bay. I'm staying away from the over/under. I will bet. Oh, yeah. I will bet the. I'll take Chicago on the points though, definitely in this one.
Yeah.
Let's move forward and we'll talk about our next game. I know we kind of got a little derailed. We talked longer on that game, I think, than we talked Titans Chiefs. But let's talk about an interesting matchup that, if not this year, maybe 3 or 4 years down the line, Drew, we're talking about, like, man, can you remember the first, well, this would be the second, but can you remember when Mac Jones and Zach Wilson were going toe-to-toe as rookies? Who would have thought they'd have grown to where they're at today, or who would have thought they're not the starting quarterbacks for where they are today? Jets at Patriots, man. Interesting matchup, or is this one you're just going to pass over and maybe just check out after the fact?
Well, I can tell you right now, I probably won't have my TV glued to this game. I've already kind of saw what Bill Belichick can do to rookie quarterbacks over and over and over, and I like Zach Wilson. I still think he's going to be a good quarterback in the future. I don't know if he's going to repeat. I think he had 3 interceptions when he played him last time. I think it was 3.
I think you're right. I think it was 3.
I don't think it's going to be repeated like that. It
was 4. I just looked it up.
It was
4 interceptions.
Oh, yeah. 4. Yeah. I definitely don't think that's going to happen. I think I just want the Jets one time. Well, it did happen a long time ago, but I want them again to have, like, great weapons for these young quarterbacks they keep bringing in and be like, all right, man, you're our franchise quarterback. Go get it. And you're like, okay, who am I going to throw to?
Yeah, the last time they had great weapons, they had Fitzpatrick as their quarterback, right? Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker. So it's been a while for them. I agree, and they've tried. Like, they've spent draft picks. They've spent money in free agency, bringing in Corey Davis as well.
Right.
It just hasn't all clicked for the Jets just yet. And the problem with that is, again, when you're just perennially at the bottom of the barrel, it's hard to sign those free agents, and you just better do a good job of drafting. But if you're doing a good job of drafting, you're probably not at the bottom of the barrel. So kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy and a self-fulfilling spiral for the Jets. I'm with you. I part of it is on Zach Wilson for me, but of all of the young quarterbacks, he's sitting right now with 4 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. He's thrown over 1,000 yards, but they haven't really done a whole lot to support him. I want to say that he struggled more than any other rookie has, but the situation is probably worse here than maybe anywhere except Jacksonville. I think I'd take Jacksonville, to be honest.
Well, Jackson, I mean, what's the run? Their running game has been
abysmal. It doesn't exist. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And same deal. They paid all that money to Le'Veon Bell and got nothing for it. So it's not like they haven't tried in the past. It's just it's not worked out.
I'm trying to pull up what they're ranked. I'd be dead last. I was like, I'd be surprised if they're not dead last. They are literally dead last in rushing. There's your answer. I mean, you could say, oh, Russell Wilson, 9 interceptions. He's not looking good, threw for over 1,000 yards. I think his completion rating's like under 50%. It's close to. It's not good. Yeah, but they're not running the ball. You just got to drop 2 safeties in the back, and it's not going to look good.
No, I agree.
I know you're blaming him because he's the guy with the ball in his hand and he's got to make the right decisions, but I just can't blame him for everything. But beyond that being said, the Jets have a great defense, but it's Belichick. If it's not turnovers in the air, it's still Belichick doing enough to make his team in the right position to win a game. Patriots are going to win this game. It's not going to be pretty. I'm going to watch it in like fast motion where it's just like, jump me to highlights, please.
Yeah.
If there is any.
Now, if nothing else, Mac Jones is taking care of the football this year. I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, they're not taking shots down the field and they're protecting him too much and everything else, but I just don't think he has the weapons to really take those shots, so I don't blame the Patriots for not wanting to throw the ball 30 yards down the field when you know your offensive line's not going to hold up when it's this banged up and you don't have the receivers to make those plays and get open anyway. So I think it's going to be a very similar affair where you're going to see New England kind of take short passes. They're going to move the ball down the field. They're going to run the ball as best that they can against this Jets front that has been very good. Like, if you can say one thing about the Jets, the defensive front with Robert Saleh has been very good. Yeah. But ultimately, I mean, Mac Jones, as long as he doesn't make too many mistakes here, I just don't see Zach Wilson having the firepower and what it takes to beat a Patriots defense that just frustrates rookies left, right, and center. I think the closest to get there this year was Davis Mills, ironically, a couple weeks ago. I don't think it's going to even look like that. I think more than anything, it's going to be another 2-3 turnover affair for Zach Wilson. And we're talking about, man, Belichick, maybe more than any other coach, knows how to handle rookies. And we're talking about the Patriots winning. Now, they won the last game 25-6, Drew. This is at a 7-point line here. I'm going to take the Patriots to cover that again. I think the Patriots are going to they're going to win. They're going to hit those 7 points like it's nothing. I think this game is going to be almost as lopsided as the first time we saw them play. We're not that far removed from week 2. And the Jets just haven't really improved. Outside of a game against Tennessee that it took them, it was realistically a tie outside of the Titans missing a 45-yard field goal. They really haven't had a lot of success this year. So I think that continues this week, and we're still going to be getting to the end of the year when we're going to say, let me ask you this. Is there any potential that Zach Wilson gets the Josh Rosen treatment where the Jets have a top pick and they're staring at one of these new quarterbacks coming out and they say, maybe it's time to move on quick?
No, I think that would be a giant mistake. We've talked off air plenty of times about the quarterbacks coming out of college this year, but beyond that, beyond the lack of talent that we both see, you don't move on from Zach Wilson. I still think this guy has plenty of talent. I got a question for you, and
Sure.
I pretty much know the answer. Is there any at all fantasy options that you'd be taking from this game?
I wouldn't love it, but I might consider Hunter Henry. I feel like he's gotten in the end zone a couple times recently, and I don't have his stats in front of me here, but I feel like he's picked it up a little bit, and sooner or later, those tight ends are going to have to justify all that money that they were paid. Jonnu Smith has basically been non-existent. He's had some injuries, but even when he's been out there, right, they really haven't involved him in the game. If I was going to pick, maybe I would go with the Patriots running back, but they just changed so much that I can't even put stock in that. So, no, realistically, Drew, I wouldn't touch any of this unless I was forced to. Maybe Michael Carter, if you're desperate and you're in like one of those like 14 or 16-man leagues that are like super, super deep, and you need like a guy that might, when they're down, the Jets are going to be throwing a lot, might get some catches for you in a PPR kind of fashion. Maybe Michael Carter there. And then I guess same deal with Corey Davis. If it's a deep league, throw him out there, see if he gets like 6 or 7 or 8 catches. But no, I mean,
Patriots
Belichick
defense.
Yeah, I'd start the Patriots defense. There you go. Great call. See, I usually don't play with defense in a lot of my fantasy leagues, so I forget about it sometimes. There's your starter.
Right.
Let's move on. We'll talk about our next game, man, which is the Panthers going on the road to face the Giants. 1-5 Giants in this one, except for a surprise win against the Saints, man. They've been close in some of these games, but it really hasn't clicked for the Giants. Could we see some heads roll when it comes to the coaching staff and maybe the GM and Dave Gettleman if they go 1-6 here?
It's so hard because you would think that's already happened. You would almost think that this has already happened, but this has to be the year, right? They can't straighten the boat out. They're going to, you're going to start.
Yeah, it's been 5 years with Gettleman, and it hasn't gotten any better.
You're going to start lessening the load, and you're going to start looking towards the future. But as bad as it sounds, it almost starts with the quarterback, right?
Theoretically, yes.
I mean, Daniel Jones has done everything he possibly can to find himself in a different uniform next year. He can't hold on to the ball.
Before this year, I'd agree with you. But realistically, like, the turnovers have been a problem. And the excuse was like, hey, he doesn't have anyone to throw to. And the offensive line is, like, awful. And not just bad. I mean, like, bottom 3 awful. Like, why even have an offensive line kind of bad? And that's kind of been the through the looking glass kind of on Daniel Jones. However, this year he's gotten better. Like, he hasn't been making as many turnover-worthy plays. I know he still has a fumble problem, and that probably won't get fixed until you fix the offensive line. Like, as long as Daniel Jones is getting hit a lot, he's going to probably drop the ball more often than other quarterbacks do. But realistically, I don't know how you can look at this year and say, oh, we're losing all these games because of Daniel Jones, when realistically, you're losing these games because the defense that was chippy and was playing kind of over their heads last year is gone now. I mean, they're awful, Drew. They might as well not field a starting 11 on defense. They might as well just let, anyone that lives in the state of New York go out there and play for them. On top of that, I mean, you're talking about Daniel Jones, like how much is his fault when you look at the injuries they've taken at receiver? They're down 4 starting wide receivers. How many teams could recover from that? I mean,
but it's not just interceptions, man. I mean, like you said, fumbles. This guy has a fumbling problem. He has a turnover problem.
And he has. But again, how much of that clears up when you actually put a semi-competent offensive line? I'm not even saying you need to be a top offensive line. Like, get to 15th. Get to 20th. Like, that's what Dave Gettleman's bread and butter is, right? Like, Dave Gettleman's job is, and his, his MO when he came from Carolina was, we're going to play tough defense, and we're going to run the ball, and we're going to block well, right? Like, the offensive, old school football. What of that has materialized over the past 5 years? They're almost like kind of halfway embracing this new age football where it doesn't really matter how bad my offensive line is as long as I have like 5 weapons and I can throw it in under 2 seconds. That was great until everyone got hurt.
I mean, they have tried to fix it. I mean, they've drafted linemen. They've went out and traded for some, signed off-season transactions. I mean, they have tried to fix it.
Sure, but it hasn't all been good. Like when you take Kevin Zeitler and you're like, see you later. We're just going to cut you and let Baltimore pick it. Or they traded him for, what was it, like a 6th-round pick or something like that. It's like, we had one good offensive lineman, and we're going to ship him off because we can't have that here in New York. I mean, Daniel Jones needs to get hit from every spot. I will say Andrew Thomas has played better, which is good because I liked him a lot coming out in the draft. I think he was my top tackle. He's either 1 or 2. I can't remember which. Liked him a lot, was talking him up, and then he gets to New York, and I was like, ooh. What did I just talked my way. I looked pretty silly with that. But he's played a lot better this year. He's about the only one, though. The rest of them are just pretty much terrible. And I'll say this, at least for the Giants. I think ultimately the blame will probably land on Daniel Jones' shoulders. They'll probably wind up moving on from him. They'll say, oh, well, time for a fresh start. We've got a really high pick. We can't not take a quarterback. But with his ability to spread the ball around and what we've seen out of Daniel Jones this year, he's cleaned up the turnovers a little bit. I think he should be one of the top acquisitions when it comes to these teams that don't have that draft pick to spend on a quarterback in this coming draft. Because we were talking about it before. There's maybe 10 teams that are going to be changing out quarterbacks. Daniel Jones should be the first guy I call, as long as I'm not one of these organizations that say, well, maybe he can do it without a quarterback or without any receivers, without an offensive line, and with a running back in Saquon Barkley that can't stay on the field. So, I don't know. We just gave Zach Wilson the benefit of the doubt when we said, oh, the Jets haven't done a lot to support him. Outside of buying a lot of injured wide receivers, what have the Giants done? At least it's worked.
They have tried to do a lot. It just has not worked out. They brought in wide receivers. They brought in tight ends. They spent a high draft pick on a running back. They've tried to bring in some offensive linemen. I mean, they have tried to do something.
And just like the Jets, none of it's worked.
None of it's worked. Well, I don't want to say none of it. I mean, Saquon's still probably one of the better running backs in the league when fully healthy. The question now is this Derek Carr's new home next year?
Oh man, we'll save that for another show because we could talk all day about that. We got to talk about the Panthers a little bit. I don't feel like we've done them a whole lot of justice in this game. Sam Darnold started hot. I was like, look, see, I was right. Take that, everybody. And then now he's been awful since then. Pretty much since I said, yeah, I was right. It's all kind of gone downhill. Now, I'm sure the strength of competition has played a little bit into that, but I think more than anything, it was me jinxing him. Does he kind of shake that jinx this week?
Yeah, they have to win this game. I know they don't have Christian McCaffrey. I know they're banged up at wide receiver, but this is a better team than the New York Giants. They might not be full strength, but neither are the Giants. The Giants are way off in the left field with injuries. This is a very good defense. I think they're the 5th ranked defense in the league. I mean, yeah, they're ranked 5th. And it's got to be them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, now this is only a 3-point line, which surprised me. I know it's on the road. I know they're facing New York, but man, 3 points against the Giants that defensively look like they're in shambles, haven't really had a great pass rush, haven't really played well against the pass or against the run. Offensively, I mean, is anyone even going to start? I mean, Kenny Galladay's out. I'm looking at this right now. Kadarius Toney's now been ruled out. Maybe Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton return, but they're both questionable. Both of those guys coming off injury, even though I like them as playmakers, I don't think are enough to overcome what the Carolina Panthers are just going to be throwing at Daniel Jones. And I think this is another one of those games that I think people are going to take out of context a little bit, because how good the Panthers have been at rushing the passer with Hassan Reddick and Brian Burns is I think, a little understated still because of the recent struggles. Those two guys are some of the most athletic defensive ends in the game right now. And going up against this Giants offensive line, they're going to, like, Daniel Jones is going to fumble like twice in this game. You heard it here first. They are going to be all over.
What a hot take. What a hot take.
Well, we're going to say, like, it's all Daniel Jones' fault when he's getting hit like 0.8 seconds into a play and everything, and his receivers aren't open. So I guess my big takeaway from this game is, like, the Giants, let me look at their schedule, because things get tougher. Like, they play the Panthers here, and then they go on the road to face the Chiefs. They have the Raiders. They have the Buccaneers, the Eagles. Like, it's going to be a tough stretch here. This team could have one win for the next 5 weeks, and it better be this week. It's not going to be, but it better be this week.
Right. The only thing they got going for them is the Panthers are 0-3 without McCaffrey. Maybe they can make it 0-4. You know, maybe that's their, you know, silver lining out there they can grab, is they can't. Hey, you don't have McCaffrey, we could beat you.
I'm not sure it's going to matter. You know, it's a 3-point line. I think Carolina gets to 3 easily, even on the road here. I think this is going to be one of those games that we get to see, okay, here's why it made sense to bring a guy like Sam Darnold in. And yes, he hasn't quite shown up against the best teams in the league yet, but it's still year one in his tenure for the Panthers. These are the games, at the very least, you want to see the guy that you traded for show up in. I think he's going to against this defense, and I think they win it easy. Let's talk Falcons and Dolphins, only because there's a man under the table with a gun pointed at me, making me do it. What's there to take away from this game here, Drew?
Just let him know that his paycheck will be in next week.
Fair.
I guess is it how much.
You can't think of one, can you?
What I want to talk about is how much does Matt Ryan have to prove that he is still a legit quarterback in this league, and the team around him is not great. Even though their defense has been playing pretty well, how much is it for everyone in this, all NFL fans that go, well, maybe my quarterback, we're looking to draft a quarterback, but maybe Matt Ryan's a great filler for right now. Or Atlanta go, you know what, let's keep him around for a couple more years. He's still got it. Even though this game isn't appealing because these teams are not that great, I'm very interested in what Matt Ryan's future is in the NFL. Because this guy is a former MVP of the league, former not Super Bowl champ, but in a Super Bowl.
About as close as you get.
Yeah. I mean, he's done as much as you could ask a quarterback to do in this league. And his team has been just full ever since the Super Bowl letdown. I mean, is this guy have a future in this league after this year? I mean, I know he's going to be playing, but like, what future?
Yeah, no, I went into last offseason, I said, look, the Falcons should not trade Matt Ryan because he still has enough left in the tank. And while I still believe he has something to give, the other kind of answer to that isn't like, hey, let's fire sale everything and trade Julio Jones, right? Like, they did one thing well, which was throw the ball. They drafted Kyle Pitts to play tight end for them, which, great pick in my opinion. I normally don't love those first-round tight ends, but when you have that much of a physical freak staring you in the face, you just got to take him. They did that. Can you imagine this offense if they still had Julio, if they still had Calvin Ridley, and then you add a dynamic tight end like that? At the very least, I'd say, well, they've got some work to do, right? Like, they maybe need to patch up this offensive line. That defense just needs overhauled, but we kind of get it. But now, instead, they've traded Julio Jones. Calvin Ridley has struggled this year. They don't seem to be, outside of the Jets game, very interested in throwing to Kyle Pitts at all. I look at Matt Ryan, and I just wonder why. Like, what is the thought process going on here? If you were going to keep this guy and you weren't going to draft somebody last year, why did you fire sale the team and trade the one thing you were good at away, which is passing the ball to multiple talented receivers? So now they're rebuilding that. They're rebuilding the offensive line. They don't really have a running back to speak of. I know Cordell Patterson's had some plays, and everyone's like, oh, we figured out Cordell Patterson now, right? He's an elite NFL playmaker because Arthur Smith has figured it out. The decision-making has been the problem with me for Atlanta. And in this game, I know it may not matter too much here. You know, they are a 2-point favorite in this one, but it just, Atlanta has struggled up and down the football field on pretty much every facet of the game this season. I just look at the offseason and I say, if this was the way it was going to be, why is Trey Lance not your quarterback, right? Or, well, I guess he was gone. Why is Mac Jones not your quarterback right now? Why is Justin Fields not your quarterback? Why did you not draft one of those guys who was still available and move on from Matt Ryan and trade him while you still could have got something out of him? Now it's
Right.
like we're kind of saddled with Matt Ryan and his contract, and we just, it's going to take 3 years to fix this team.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. It makes no sense, but you kind of also knew that Julio Jones was probably going to be a cancer in that locker room. He wanted out of there. It's not the right move to trade him, but it was the right move to trade him because you don't want that.
I mean, if you're going to trade him, move on from Matt Ryan too. I felt like this all came down at a bad time for Atlanta fans. And if Julio had said before the draft, like, hey, I know we're going to be bad and I'm trying to win a Super Bowl, get me out of here, maybe then you move off Matt Ryan. And as much as I like Matt Ryan, you just got to face facts that he's, 38 now, 37? Quarterbacks tend to not get much better. Everyone's going to say, oh, Tom Brady's 45. I know, not everybody's Tom Brady. Big Ben Roethlisberger's 40, and look at him. Like, who do you think Matt Ryan's closer to right now? Big Ben style decline or Tom Brady, he's 45 and still going? Because I think he's closer to Big Ben.
I don't know if he's that bad, but yeah, he's
closer to.
Yeah. It's tilting that direction. So the next question is on the other side of the quarterback. Tua is finally back, well, semi-healthy. His cracked ribs maybe are healed. You're bringing him in last week. You got a sad loss against the winless Jags. Gave them their first win. That's a game that they should never let them slip by. How much is it on Tua's mind that there's so much talk about Deshaun Watson? There's so much talk about maybe Tua's not the right guy, or maybe put on Brissett back in. I mean, is that going to bother a guy like Tua? Is there a future in Miami for Tua? I mean, I think so. I would like to think that you give this guy another year after this year. I mean, you went out and drafted him. You already kind of knew he was an injury-prone quarterback going from college with that really bad hip injury. I mean, you kind of already expected that. I know they're like, well, the doctor said they were healthy, but you knew this guy was getting banged up.
Yeah.
I think you got to give him another year, but all this talk from fans and everywhere else, and you're not going out there and squashing. I mean, I've talked about this before on the show, but it's got to get to this guy.
Yeah, I think it's getting to him. To your point, like, you knew he has injury problems, so the grand scheme this year was like, hey, let's keep having the worst offensive line in football. Not really sure what that was about, but, I guess I'm not in the Dolphins front office either. Yeah, I don't know. At the very least, I understand the desire to get Jalen Waddle, but this is the Joe Burrow argument that played out. Like, everybody in Miami was probably thinking the exact same thing that was just louder in Cincinnati, where they're like, we need to fix this offensive line because our quarterback can't stay on the field. And instead, they took the wide receiver, and instead of the great results they've seen out of Cincinnati with Jamar Chase coming in, Jalen Waddle hasn't made that kind of impact. Now, they're still kind of struggling in ways to get him involved in the offense. They really haven't found the role that fits him. But more importantly than that, this offensive line it might as well not be on the field. I said the same thing about the Giants, but at least Andrew Thomas is playing all right for them. There's not a single guy in this offensive line I'm like, man, he needs to be here next year. Now, they've invested on it, just like with guys like Austin Jackson. They now moved him into guard because he can't play tackle. They've got other guys on this offensive line like Jesse Davis that should have been replaced years ago. It's like, I just don't understand the thought process. I think we're getting a little bit too tied up in some of the newer analytical thinking of, hey, I just need to have 4 wide receivers and I'm going to have a good offense because there's other teams out there that do that. Sure, but what do those other teams usually do as well? Block a little bit for their quarterback so he has time to throw to those guys. Yeah, I think when it comes to this game, it doesn't matter who wins. I mean, I know Miami's at 1-5 right now. I know there's the theory that they're either going to trade for a quarterback or maybe they're going to draft one instead for Tua, but does that solve the problems? If you brought Deshaun Watson in, Deshaun Watson won 4 games with the Texans last year, and they had similar problems where their offensive line was bad, and it wasn't this bad. So yeah, you're going to put Deshaun Watson in here, and then what changes? Nothing, because your offensive line is so bad that it's actively hurting the team week in and week out. So yeah, I think all of that gets to Tua. I think all of it is kind of in his head. I will say the one thing he probably has going for him, I know I'm taking the long way around your question, but at the very least, he's been through a similar kind of scenario at Alabama when Jalen Hurts was in front of him and got hurt. Now, there was kind of calls like, okay, when Hurts came back, they were like, all right, well, maybe it should be his offense, but Tua kind of dispelled that by playing well. And maybe last week where he put up those 300 yards is the first step to Tua playing well. Now, I know it was against Jacksonville. I know you got to take it with a grain of salt anytime a guy succeeds against one of those bottom-tier teams in the league. But maybe this is the game that he builds on. Maybe this is the next game where Tua maybe puts up 280 yards and 2 touchdowns and takes care of the football, even if he's running for his life. And we can say, okay, well, maybe if we put an offensive line in front of him, maybe if we try to work on this running game, he can be a great quarterback in the NFL. Because right now, I don't know how much you learn when a guy's under this kind of pressure. It's like you're going to throw him out like he's the problem, kind of like I'm talking about with Daniel Jones. But you don't really know that. You didn't put him in a scenario where you can survive and he can thrive in. That was a lot. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I don't like him going back out there if his ribs are not completely healthy. I guess Flores was thinking we have to win this game. Our best chance to win is with Tua out there. Maybe let him sit another week, let his ribs get healthy. But this defense that the Atlanta Falcons have been putting out is actually ranked 3rd in the league. And I know it hasn't turned out to be W's for this team, but maybe this is also the reason why. Maybe they were looking on their schedule going, well, why don't we stick them out there a little banged up against the Jags defense before we face the Atlanta Falcons, who are a better defense, are probably going to hit Tua a lot more and see if what he's got left. Who knows what the front office was thinking or the head coach was thinking, but it seems like to me that you got to give Tua another chance next year. All this stuff I've talked it many times is squash all the rumors. Say Tua's our guy. We're going into it next year regardless. Give this man confidence. You went out, like you said, and got a receiver instead of getting other pieces to your team that probably would have been helpful. You said, hey, here's another weapon for you. You played with them. You have the connection. Go out and prove that you're our guy. Because it seemed like it, right? I know you said go pick an offensive lineman, but the pretty pick isn't to pick an offensive lineman. It's to pick a receiver that your quarterback's used to, or a receiver that your quarterback's used to, and flourish his numbers, right? Get your fan base excited about what this offense can look like.
This is really just two sides of the same coin, because the same argument was made in Cincinnati, and it worked out with Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, where it's like, okay, they have chemistry together. They've played, for years in college together, or at least a year in college together, and had massive success, so we'll just bring them in, and it's all going to work out. I mean, in Cincinnati, that has gone exactly to plan, but in Miami, it's like Jalen Waddle they don't really seem like they know how to use him. They don't really seem like they know what role he really fits in the offense. So, like, realistically, this is the side of the coin where that model of thinking just didn't work. And I agree that they should have probably gone I understand the thought process, but I still think they should have gone with an offensive lineman for the simple fact that, yes, Tua has other weapons with him. Like, they brought in Will Fuller in the offseason. They still have Devontae Parker. They have those guys, but he has the injury concerns that, again, outside of an ACL with Joe Burrow, haven't been there for him. So I don't think it's exactly pound for pound. I think they kind of neglected the offensive line, and the difference being, at the very least, the Bengals were like, hey, we're gonna sign Riley Reif to play right tackle for us. We're gonna draft Jackson Carman in the second round and stick him in at guard. Like, we're gonna try to get better on the offensive line, even if it's not blockbuster kind of material where we're gonna spend our top 10 pick on a guy. Miami, they just kind of like looked at the guys they've got and they're like, hey, that'll be fine. And now we're looking around like, no, it's not. You guys have one win. You guys just lost to Jacksonville, and you've got an injury-prone quarterback and nothing to show for it. All right. Yeah, so I don't know. I really think they probably should have gone in a different direction. I like the idea of bringing in more weapons than people know what to do with and know how to stop, but there comes a point in time where you have to like have some offensive linemen that know what that can handle themselves, and I just don't think Miami's done a good job of recognizing where they were at on the offensive line before the year started.
Well, we talked about all the downfalls of both these teams and how terrible they are.
Yeah, they actually have to play a game here.
How do you see the outcome of this game real quickly?
I know for one thing, I wouldn't bet any of it. I know the Falcons are a 2-point favorite here, or a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to just say Matt Ryan because of the experience. I mean, you just lost to Jacksonville. I don't know how much faith I'm allowed to have in the Dolphins at this point. I don't think I'm allowed to say that they're going to win having lost to Jacksonville. Maybe that was enough to embarrass them into it. I don't think so. I'm going to go the Falcons win in an ugly game that, like you talked about before, I'm going to have this one on fast forward if I can.
Yeah, I got the Falcons winning too. It's Xavier Howard and Byron Jones out for Miami, their top two corners. I think Matt Ryan should have a field day throwing to some open receivers during this game. I got the Falcons winning.
All right, well, it just gets worse. The Texans go on the road to face the Cardinals. Drew, Where are we at now? 18 points on this line in the pros. I never thought I'd see this, to be honest. 18 points. That's like an Alabama stat line right there.
You sure it's not 21? It should be 21 points.
Yeah, I hate it. 18 points in the NFL. Like, how do you pick that? I mean, I know the Cardinals have been this year's darling. They've been amazing, but just 18 points out of any professional team, man. I still got to do it. I'm gonna take the Cardinals. It's crazy to hear, and ultimately, it wouldn't surprise me if the Texans did wind up covering that 18-point spread, because how can you not, man? 3 scores. Like, I feel like the Cardinals might just take their foot off the gas and let them get back into 18 points. But if you look at the way these two teams have played, I mean, the Cardinals still undefeated at 6-0. Just about everything's worked out for them. They have so many receivers and so many weapons that have worked really well for them. Plus, Kyler Murray playing at a higher level than we've ever seen him play versus what? Like Whitney Merciless getting cut off of the Houston Texans because he was becoming an attitude problem, though. Like, let's just get him out of here. We couldn't even trade him for anything. They just cut him, and now he's going to go probably play for Green Bay. Yeah, I think all signs point to, like, just massive implosion out of Houston, and I'm going to say, Drew, I don't love this bet just because of the number, but I'd still take the Cardinals hands down over picking the Houston Texans to do anything right now.
Yeah, it's Cardinals win this game easily. I think the only thing that kind of is interesting to look at is that when you look at all their rankings, the offense and defense and their passing and rushing is all above 10, except their defense is ranked 11th. I think after this week, they're probably going to be top 10 in every category across the board.
This is definitely one of those get-right games where you just want to see them come out and destroy everybody. Yeah, anything the Texans can do to get out of that 1-5 spot here? Is there any way they can win this game?
Murray breaks his leg.
I'll just say put Tyrod in. Roll the dice. I mean, it's not going to happen. I think at this point it doesn't do you any good to start Tyrod Taylor because, I mean, you're just messing up your own draft pick at that point for a guy that's not going to be your starter next year anyway. So if it was going to happen, maybe Tyrod could pull it off. Who knows?
And a knock on wood, I don't want Kyler Murray to break his leg.
Right. Absolutely. Knock on wood that's not around. Yeah, so I'll take the Cardinals to cover. Would you bet on the Cardinals to win by more than 18?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm really surprised it's not 21 points.
Okay.
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad on the Houston Texans. I've called many teams in the past a dumpster fire, but I think this is truly a dumpster fire.
I don't know that they have a dumpster.
It's just a fire in the field.
It's just a trash fire. Yeah. Okay.
Dumpster's too good for them? Is that what you're trying to say?
Say something nice about the Texans.
Okay.
They're going to have a good pick and maybe potentially get their first choice of quarterback this year.
They have a nice stadium.
I feel like the Lions are going to grab one or two the way that they've played, so they'll probably have the first pick, and they'll get their guy next year.
I like former players that played with the Texans.
All right, that's enough.
Okay.
Let's move on and talk about our next game, which is the Jared Goff revenge game. The Lions going on the road to face the Rams. Another just massively lopsided game. Can I ask you this?
This is the game.
Can I ask you this? This is a 16-point line here. So obviously Vegas doesn't like this game a whole lot more than the one we were just talking about. But is there a chance that we're underestimating the Matt Stafford revenge game here? Everyone's talking about Jared Goff has his feelings hurt because he's shipped off. And I'll admit it, man. Like, that 100% is true. I mean, they sent this guy out here to Detroit to die, and Detroit went into this offseason knowing we're not fixing it this year. We're not even going to try. We're just going to bring in Dan Campbell, and we're going to let him work on some of the ugly parts of the team, like the offensive, the defensive line. We'll figure the rest of it out later. Does Matt Stafford have a grudge to hold here? Like, do you think there's a little bit of like, hey, I'm 33 or 34 right now, and you guys kind of wasted my career? I'm going to show you exactly what you were wasting in this game?
There's definitely something to say for revenge games for both quarterbacks, but I was laughing because you're talking about, the Dolphins and how they've done nothing to help Tua. Talk about the Lions bringing in Jared Goff, changing of the helm, and talk about what they did, shipped every receiver off, said, see you later. We're not going to pay you. And said, well, we'll be fine. We'll be fine.
We'll figure it out.
Which quarterback has a bigger grudge against a former team?
Well, I would say,
Jared Goff really be mad at the Rams? I mean,
yeah, Yeah.
I guess.
I took you to a Super Bowl, and you sent me to Detroit. Not only Detroit, like Detroit giving up.
Take him to a Super Bowl.
They went to a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. Maybe he wasn't the reason.
No. He did not take them.
Okay, all right.
The
but
team
in
around
his mind, put yourself in Jared Goff's shoes. You would be saying, I took you to a Super Bowl, and you stabbed me in the back. Right? Like, isn't that the way this feels? Because that's what it feels like to me. I know Jared Goff, Dan Campbell came out and was like, hey, the team sucks after last week. He didn't say it. I'm paraphrasing here, but he's like, the team sucks, but Jared Goff kind of sucks too.
He used some tough words.
He didn't say that exactly, but, it's he might as well have.
He pretty much said that about his own quarterback, to be honest. He pretty much called his quarterback out. And then at the end of the rant he had, he was like, but the rest of the team has to do more too.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
He literally said Jared Goff has to do more.
Yeah.
And then as he was sitting there going, I probably shouldn't have said that out loud. The rest of the team has to do more.
And he's right in both cases, but I'll say this. Jared Goff has 100% a good reason to have a grudge. We talk about those revenge games. If there has been anybody in the NFL that has more reason to be kind of spiteful to their former employer, I think it's Jared Goff. Maybe you could say there's some other guys out there. I don't know. I'm hard-pressed to think of them right now, though, because they knew the Lions were going to be bad. The Lions knew they were going to be bad, and they said kind of what we were saying about Matt Ryan. They're like, we know we're going to suck. Why just chew up the last couple of years of Matt Ryan's career, or of Matt Stafford's career, even though Stafford is younger? I'm not saying he's washed up or anything like that, but they looked at themselves hard in the mirror and said, yeah, he's a good quarterback, but he ain't doing much for us the way the roster's in right now, the shape of the roster's in right now. So let's ship him off. We'll take Jared Goff as long as you give us 2 first-round picks, and we'll just eat that contract. That's what this is, Drew. This is Detroit eating money because they don't have anything else going on and they have to spend it anyway. They bought 2 first-round picks, and all it cost them was $35 million they're paying Jared Goff every year.
Yeah, it's to me, when you talk about a revenge game, I'd like to see both quarterbacks have great teams going into it. But if you put this in like racing a car, you bought Matthew Stafford a Ferrari and you bought Jared Goff a Pinto. I mean, it's one-handed. The Rams are going to win this game. I think you're going to see a resurgence of that defense. I know they have been playing great the whole season. They've been kind of picking up a little bit. You're going to see a better defense out there. You're going to see them getting after the quarterback. On the other side of the ball, what can the Lions do to win? I mean, do you believe in a run game? Do you believe in a run game? All of it's pretty trash. They're all ranked terrible. It's Goff magic, if there's such a thing. Maybe that's what wins this game for the Lions, but it's the Rams.
Well, I don't think they're winning the game. I know you don't either. I'm just saying, let me throw out the obvious here. I don't think they're going to win at that 16-point dog, but I mean, the Lions have been kind of one of those prickly teams that hang with people sometimes. I got 2 words for you, Drew. Garbage time. I think the Lions are going to draw back in at the end of this game because it's going to be the 4th quarter. Everyone else has phoned it in because, it's 21. They're down 21, and Jared Goff is going to say, no, this is where I draw the line in the sand, throws that last-minute touchdown that's going to bring this to a 14-point loss instead of a 21-point loss. And that's going to be the difference in the betting line in this one. 16 is too much for me. There's too many of these games that are in the 15-point range. They're not all going to hit. I'm going to say this is the one that the Lions crawl back in and cover this massive, massive line because Jared Goff says, I'm a woman scorned, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Jared Goff is just going to come back and say, even though the game's over for everybody else, I'm still trying hard. I'm still trying out here with a point to prove. This is why you shouldn't have got rid of me, even though every indication is that the Rams have made the right decision to this point. Sunday night. Does it get any better for you when we see the Colts go on the road to face the 49ers?
Yeah, I actually think that these are arguably the best 2-win teams. Maybe.
Maybe the Eagles? And I didn't see that before the season started. I thought the Eagles would be down in the dumps, but the way they've played, maybe I put the Eagles in that conversation with them. Maybe. But they're good. I think both of these teams have been good teams. Probably better than those 2-win records. I mean, Indy was how close to beating Baltimore? The The 49ers almost beat the Packers. Like, these teams are battling in a lot of these games.
Colts almost beat the Rams.
Yeah.
I mean, I think both of these teams are better than their records say. I think with Wentz getting hurt kind of held back the Colts. I think when Garoppolo got banged up, that hurt the 49ers. I do think injuries are an issue for both of them. They're both still really banged up teams. I see the favorite is the 49ers, but maybe because it's at home, but they're 0-2 at home this year. I know COVID's kind of over with. We've got fans back in the field, but I said this in an earlier podcast with you or show with you. Are home games not near as important as they used to be? And I know you still got Seattle, and you still got Gillette Stadium. You still got Arrowhead, where it's tough to play in. But it seems like home games aren't that much of a victory difference for teams playing at home. I feel like it's a different. And that being said, I am very, very leaning towards the Colts. This is a hard game for me to pick. If you're going to put a gun to my head and make me choose, I'm going to pick the Colts to win this game.
I think a lot of it just depends on health. I mean, obviously Trey Lance is out for this game for the 49ers. I know Jimmy G is still kind of fighting his way back from injury. I don't think he's going to miss this game, but I think it's going to be close enough that maybe that is the difference in this one. Now, Indy's had their own fair share of injuries, but as long as Carson Wentz has been out there, I don't want to say he's always made them look good, but at the very least, they've been in some of these games with him battling through some of those injuries. I just don't see the 49ers really doing that with a third quarterback. Now, on paper, Jimmy G stays healthy. I'm going to take them through this game through and through. I think that 4-point line is right about where I'd have it. I'll say they'll get to 5 just so I can pick the 49ers, but I think there's a very real chance here that Jimmy G is going to come out just flat because of that injury to his calf here he sustained a couple weeks ago, and the Colts win this one. So I don't love betting on this game either. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. I'm going to take the 49ers still. I'll hold my nose and take it, Drew, but I really just... Shut up. I'll hold my nose and pick the 49ers. And realistically, man, it's one of those games that if either one of these teams win, I'm not going to come into the show when we do it next week and say, oh, man, could you believe that happened? No, I think this is going to be a good game. I like this on Sunday night when I looked at the rest of these matchups. But I got to say, I think when it comes down to it, I think Indianapolis and the struggles they've had on defense are just going to be what holds them back if a healthy Jimmy G is playing for the 49ers in this one.
Well, it looks like Trent Williams is going to be out. He's going to be out without his left tackle out there. You got a tough front seven in the Colts defense. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard pressed if he's getting hit and the ball has to come out quicker. I know the secondary and the Colts are kind of banged up. I got to pick the Colts, man. I'm going to pick the Colts. I think we're going to go difference on this.
I like it. Hey, thanks for watching. We hope you like what you saw. If you did, do us a favor, hit that like button down at the bottom of the video. It helps us out so much and tells YouTube we don't suck. And also, if you like talking sports and you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button because we'd love to hang out and get to talk more sports and have a drink with you.